I'm here at DELTA Soundworks in Germany with Daniel Deboy. You guys do a lot of things here. Can you try to sum it up and tell us what it is that DELTA Soundworks does?
So DELTA Soundworks does immersive audio production in a nutshell. And for us, always the storytelling that is important. So our projects are mostly found in the entertainment sector. So we are doing sound for full dome formats and big screens, which is, like the name suggests, big screens that surround you. And we also do virtual reality experiences. And we do attractions, so that would be theme park rides, like a roller coaster, something like that. And the one thing that always has to be, it has to be immersive, and we have to be able to use like spatial audio technology to add on to the story and make an added value to our clients, so that the users or the listeners really see and feel and experience the added value of spatial audio.
And you keep saying us. Tell everybody about your team, because it's you and currently two others, one of which is a co-founder.
Exactly. So Anna Monti is my co-founder and business partner since many years. We started in 2016. And since very recently, we have a third member, Marcus Auer, who is doing interactive audio design. So he's very much into programming in game engines and scripting audio and implementing audio. And Anna is the sound designer and creative head of our company. So she kind of shapes and forms the sound worlds that we are creating. And my side is more on a technical point of view. I am coming from a engineering background, and I am mostly in charge of seeing, okay, what kind of spatial audio system do we have? How do we use it properly? What kind of formats do we need to use in our production to bring out the best experience? Because this is ultimately what we want for our clients.
Can you walk us from the top to the bottom, a workflow of a new project?
Sure. So for us, it's very important that we are not just seen as the sound guys doing some sound design and delivering some sound files, but we really want to be like the one-stop shop solution for audio. So we are consulting our clients from the very beginning of a project. So in the best case, from day one, he would talk to us, see what's possible, and tell us about the story, so we can learn about what the project really needs. We can decide, okay, it makes sense to use spatial audio. It doesn't. Is it really a project for us? Does it make sense to have us on board? So there will always be a phase of kind of consulting where you're really just discussing things and getting to know each other. And then later we define kind of the package that we do content creation wise. So sometimes it might be that the music is already being done by some other composer, and he would just deliver, or she would just deliver stereo stems and that we work with. Or we decide to have our own composer from our team to design the music, and then we might produce it here in-house. So it really depends what the project needs and what the clients need. And then it depends, of course, where the project is going. Is it like for VR classes? Does it need interactive audio design? And Marcus would come in, work on that side of things. Or if it's more like a linear, film style of production, then it would usually be me who does the mix in the end, the spatial audio mix. And very often we work for location-based projects. So that would be played in a venue like a planetarium or in the theme park itself. So Anna and me would go there and really tune the mix that we created and prepared here in the studio and optimize it for the venue. And especially for most of our projects, there is no standard format. So we really have to work it out and see what's best. So there's no, like, you can use Dolby Atmos, deliver that, it's going to sound good. We don't have that standard in the niche that we are working in. So for all three of them, full dome, for VR, for theme park rides, you always are faced with some very individual setup that you have to work with.
You guys have a really awesome system here that's all Atom speakers. And I'm sure you can do a lot here, but it sounds like you're saying for many projects, you need to actually go there and mix it for where it will be experienced by the end listener.
Yes. Like one of our main missions is to work on and help shape like a standard for these type of experiences. I think we're not there yet. And very often when you come to a venue, the system is tuned very weirdly, and very often you would have to actually go inside the system and see, okay, what's wrong here? And then maybe even retune a little bit, or you have to shape your production on the production side and make it work for that venue if you know it's just going to be played back on that venue. But then when it's a film production, then usually you will want to play it back not only in one venue, but then for more than one venue. So we design our process that in the end we can very easily switch from system to system. So when we have like a film that needs to be played back in a new venue, we get the specifications of the venue. We can just hack that into our system, and off you go. The rendering is being beautifully done, hopefully, for that system. And then maybe that needs a little bit of adjustment and fine-tuning still. So it's always good, and you get the best sound when you go there and be able to fine-tune for a couple of hours even. So we can just bring the whole production in and do that. Or if it's not possible, then we can also just deliver for any speaker setup, basically.
What are some of the main differences between mixing for stereo and now moving into this more immersive world that's becoming increasingly more popular?
Yeah, and I mean, in recent years it has. And I think the most crucial part for me is that you have, as the name already suggests, spatial audio, you kind of have to work with the space. And it gives you so much more freedom. And I think it's so much more towards natural hearing and the way our ears are supposed to hear. And we have been socialized and trained with stereo sound, which has a lot of limitations if you think about it. There's only so much space to pan things. There's only so much dynamic range to make everything pop out, and work. And in spatial audio, you just have so much more possibilities to do that and much more freedom.
Yeah. Clearly, we've got the left and right barriers with stereo.
Right.
Something that Professor Thomas Gorna mentioned is that when we move from mono to stereo, we sort of have to remember, okay, someone may play this on a mono speaker again. So we don't want to make the dynamic range too wide. We don't want too many frequencies in these certain bands. And then he said the same thing could happen when you go into a surround format. Do you feel that happening? Do you always have to consider stereo as a mixdown?
Luckily, the kind of projects that we do don't ask for that. So I know it's kind of an issue with music production. I have done a few Dolby Atmos mixes and found myself the need to also prepare a stereo kind of down mix. And I ran into these exact problems. But when we work on our projects, it's mostly, let's say, location-based, or it's for VR. So by definition, it's only going to be played in immersive audio format. So we don't have a need usually to have a stereo down mix or something. So we are very lucky in this position.
Yeah, that is lucky. And so on the flip side of that, do you feel more free? And do you have extended bandwidth and dynamic range with a wider canvas?
Definitely. I mean, the way I think about mixing has completely changed since I'm working with spatial audio, because it gives you just so much more freedom in terms of where you can position. And the way I used to start a mix was very different towards what I do now. Is more like, okay, I think about the space in the first place, and then how I want to, use up that space to create a good experience, good listening experience that also caters for the story that the sound is supposed to carry. Because I think that's very important, that you have like an added value coming from the space that you're using, and not just like an effect and a gimmick, let's say.
And that's a point that we were talking with Anna, your business partner. She is the sound designer So she was telling me
Right.
about story and how at the end of her career in college, or at the end of her schooling in college, she learned from going from a music background, going into sound for video, this whole element of telling a story with sound. So can you tell me about how you handle the technical side where we're going to deliver this storytelling, but how do you work with her collaboratively throughout that whole process?
I mean, first of all, it's not like a stage 1, stage 2 kind of thing. There's always a bit of interaction between us, obviously. I mean, our team is only small and we're not a big company that would have like, you do that, I do that. So we always interact, of course, throughout the process. But in general, you could say Anna would start working on creating, the kind of the sound world that the story needs, and then starts to create the sounds, tries out these more singular, possibly more mono-ish things. And then we build and work on top of that. So we think about, okay, what kind of the object or sound does need the whole space? Which object probably just needs like a small location and should be pinpoint sharp for a certain sound that you really see on the picture also. And then we start bringing that all together. And then at some point, I just take over the session. So it's basically Anna already knows, okay, we need this and this format for creating that atmosphere in this case, and then maybe just a mono object that later on will be automated in the system. And so she prepares that and leaves the automation off for now. And that would be something I take over later, because very often I go to the venue for mixing, and then only in the venue we would figure out, okay, we need to position it here and there. And so these kind of things, it's a very mixed way of using the different formats that we usually do. So it's not only object-based, it's not only channel-based, it's, there's ambisonics in it, so we use everything just to utilize it in the best way. And I would probably kind of consult during the process of the creation what kind of format would work best to carry that story in there.
And what sort of considerations do you need to consider? What sort of things do you need to consider when deciding what format best suits a particular project?
So first of all, it depends very much on the venue or the end format that it's going to be used in. So if it's definitely different if it's an XR virtual reality experience that's going to be, watched with VR classes on, and then you have binaural sound, as opposed to having a full dome cinema where you have the screen all around you, like in a planetarium, and you have like 30 speakers that you can utilize to make a really huge sound field. So it starts with this. So we kind of define, okay, what's there that we can make use of. For example, in a theme park ride, it might be a bunch of speakers that are just randomly placed. I mean, hopefully the people who planned it carefully enough that they were thinking already about the story that needs to be told there. But very often we also find some random speakers lying around. We go like, okay, let's use this and try out to use it for some atmospheric, spatialized thing here. And so we take this as our basis. And then in terms of the elements that come from the sound design creation, I guess you could in general say the more atmospheric sounds, they are kind of filling up the room. So they would usually probably be more like in a channel-based format, like 714. Probably recorded, we have a really nice mic rig with a 704 design. So we can have a really nice decorrelated recording of atmosphere. Then we bring that in. Then we add the object sound effects. Then there's probably like objects that are big and moving, so they might need a stereo that you kind of pan through the room, or a bit more advanced. We very often use the sound particle software to already create something in an ambisonics field or render it out in channel based. That really depends on what we need later on in the mix to cater for the system that it's going to be mixed.
Yeah. Tell me more about that Sound Particles plugin suite, and not even plugin, but software suite. I've seen them at AES and at NAMM, and they've given me the demonstrations. Are you referring to the one where you put in a sound and it sort of makes it immersive?
Yes, I mean, I'm not an expert on it because I don't use it too much. Anna's the one using it a lot. But the way I understand it, it's more like a CGI-based approach. So I think of it a bit like a game engine already. So you would really have objects in a XYZ space. You can position them. You can have tracks and traces where the sound particles are running around. And you can spread out things like creating like hundreds and thousands of these particles and then just like add one sound file and it automatically creates, all the movements, all the spatial like feeling inside of it. And it creates basically a sound field. And so you can use it for things passing by. You can use it for objects moving inside a room. And then what you do at the end is you position a kind of virtual microphone array. So to say, so you can really have everything starting from a mono recording to stereo. You can have 5.0 surround, and you can add more, and you can even do ambisonic. So it's really very versatile when it comes to formats, and that's what I really like about it. I think Anna loves just using it because it makes things a lot easier to make impressive like scenes.
Yep. I remember that you could load in one file, and it's not just going to copy and paste that 100 times or 1,000 times. It's going to make decorrelated versions of it, right? So if you have maybe one person clapping, for a very simple example, but you wanted a whole crowd of people clapping, this plugin, or I keep saying plugin, this software could take that one sound source and multiply it and make each multiplication sound a little bit different, which really adds to the realism. There's a little bit of debate for music. Will it become immersive, or will this just be something that comes and goes, like maybe 5.1 or quad for music? But for me, and I think for most people, for film, for interactive experiences, for theme parks and edutainment, these more immersive experiences, there's no doubt that immersive audio is going to catch on.
I mean, it is an absolute must, I would say, for any type of storytelling in VR, in virtual reality. Definitely a must for theme parks. I mean, they are by definition immersive because you're, inside the story. I think you could say everything where you're really standing inside the story is what we do. So, you're right. It just needs to be there. It's a natural progression. It needs to be there. Everything else would be wrong, in my opinion.
Can you tell us about a project that you've been working on?
Yeah, let me think. One of the previous projects that we worked on was a show with a working title called Fractles. It's a full dome show, so it is for a planetarium kind of science center cinema. It has not been released yet, but it has been very special because it was the first project where I experienced to work with a composer who already thinks in spatial audio, in immersive audio, and really utilizes it. And I think that's really the way to go, where immersive audio can shine when it comes to music. So the show is made with Fractles, which is a mathematical formula in the end where it boils down to. So there is a software, I think, where you can create those fractal structures. And Julius, the artist, he just designed these fractal worlds with it using these formulas. So there's absolutely no CGI or designing of objects by hand. So it's all computer generated. But then it's not, completely random because he's choosing the scenes and then colorizing them and using After Effects to create these amazing worlds where you have the camera rides through it later. And it really is a very abstract thing, and it probably also a bit psychedelic, but then it really your brain associates with things like in nature, architecture, and then brain network kind of things. Those are the three pillars that are also in the story. And the amazing thing is that you think like, okay, I'm seeing nature here, but then I'm not, because it's not really, you cannot pinpoint to it and say this is a tree. It's more like, okay, this is something that looks like a tree, but then it's not. But my brain feels like, okay, I'm in nature. So this is really great. And then it leaves a lot of openness for creativity, also for the sound, I would say. And composer who did work on it is Michael Stantz. He's from the US and very well-known artist, ambience artist. He has done a lot of work for IMAX films, I think, and this kind of planetarium shows, going all the way back to the 70s, I would say. So he's really experienced, very nice guy, and he loves to use these new technologies. And I mean, he has worked his whole life in this immersive field. At least the visuals were always immersive, and there was probably already like quad or some kind of surround format back then. And now he's using like his full range of speakers at his studio, and already uses that during the composition process, which I found very interesting. Even though there might not be the tools who output more than stereo or mono, he's still utilizing like effects and creating these kind of spaces, positioning things already during composition. And I find that very important and also very inspiring.
What are the main differences between a composer who's sending you files, like maybe stereo stems, or or creating and composing music with immersive in mind from the beginning?
I think so. What I usually get as a mixing engineer when we have external music, I get stereo stems, and then there might be some idea of like, okay, do whatever you want and create a 3D sound field if you want, and there's only so much you can do with the stereo material. But I think you can always create something nice, obviously. But I think it adds another dimension when it's already thought during the production process, the composition process, the creation process. So you start using things and space mainly in a different way. I would say you can create more contrast using like a spherical sound that surrounds you, that fills up the room, and then there's like one little element that is like, very mono-ish. And then you have this huge contrast between something that fills up a room versus something that is really pinpoint sharp at some position. I think that's tools that composers need to learn to use for creating immersive music that really has an added value. Because I think if you just take the stereo stems and do something with it, it will always be a little bit gimmicky. Or it will, like we probably very often did with surround format music, where we would just add a little bit of reverb in the back, and give that kind of space feeling. It's nice, works for certain things. But I think when it comes to using and utilizing that new technology, it's really crucial that you start diving into it as a composer and really make use of these tools. It gives you a new dimension.
Yeah, it sounds like, again, getting back to music, most music consumption is still done in stereo. So the main focus, and even the way we think about writing music, is stereo. That's the paradigm. Even as a musician, most music you've ever heard is either mono or stereo. So even your entire idea about what music is and your ideas of what your music will sound like starts from that groundwork or from that foundation.
Yes.
But moving forward, if we want more immersive experiences in film or in music, I think we're going to just have to change our paradigm and think about that potential for contrast, like you said. An example would be loud and quiet. That's a contrast that you can have in mono or stereo. A contrast that you can only have in stereo would be wide or narrow.
Which would possibly be like similar to what you get in immersive format, but then it's just so much more huge if you compare it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not saying this is like the wrong way, but we are just socialized with stereo, I would say, and this is totally fine. And possibly there is certain genres of music even where you would say, okay, there is absolutely no added value with 3D, adding this 3D layer. And then possibly there's other genres where it's very imminent and clear that it has an advantage. I'm talking about classical music. If you think about recording music in a really nice space, and if you can transfer that space to the listener in a more realistic, perfect way, then it has already an added value. But then when you talk about, let's say, more into the realms of pop culture or pop music, then I think this gimmicky approach will not get us to new aesthetics. And this is what it needs. It needs a completely new aesthetics. It's probably not for every song in the world that it needs to be an immersive, you know. So maybe there's certain music that needs to be in this space because it's using it.
Yeah, like you said, part of classical music is the space. Part of the normal modality of appreciating classical music is sitting in a concert hall and hearing the space. And so for those genres, it makes perfect sense. Most consumption of pop music has been stereo or in headphones.
If you think about hip hop, for example, you totally want to have that in your head, kind of no externalization for the rap vocals or the kick drum or something, you know, and it doesn't make sense to do it. So, but maybe there is some other new genre coming up. I mean, if you think about it, every time there was like a new technology coming up in music technology, there would be a new genre. It would always create these new genres even, right? So maybe there's something new coming that we don't even know about.
We always, every time, while I've been out here in Germany, I've found that immersive audio is just as big here, if not bigger, than in the United States. It seems that everyone I talk to is somehow interested or working on something related to immersive audio. In every single conversation, though there are so many people who are skeptical about immersive audio and its application for music, every conversation I have leads somehow to an expert like you or like the others I've interviewed on the channel bringing up music. And for me, it's those people, you're not a company who is selling big speaker systems. It's not a marketing ploy. You're truly just interested in it. And what that tells me is that this isn't just all marketing hype. The experts in the field are actually seeing a potential for how immersion or immersive technologies can support the story, even in music. But walking it back a little bit,
right.
What are some non-music applications that you've worked on?
Yeah, maybe we can quickly come back to the project Fractles, because that was an end of story. So in addition to the music that Michael created, Anna also did her part on the sound design. So she added a lot of these, it could be like pass-bys of objects, because there's obviously a lot of things passing by. But then there's also these like more organic sounds that really add on to the scenery that you see, and that really makes it more alive kind of thing. So if you take that away, the music's still nice, you can listen to it, but adding this organic sound design part to it really added up and made it complete, I would say. So that was really interesting to see, and also very cool to see how these two things, from the musical side, but then also from the sound design side, these things totally merged and melted together. So you cannot tell in that show, is it sound design or is it a music element in some scenes? So that's really cool.
And that's something that is not the case with most movies. The soundtrack is usually the soundtrack, and then if let's say it's a war scene or something, the planes flying by, those are much more immersive than the music. But do you think that the new technology we're starting to see pop up is allowing for everything to become immersive?
I would say, and this was probably one thing for this particular project that really had all these, three elements: visuals, sound design and music on the same importance level, let's say, and it all played really nicely together. So this might be a unique example. And generally, I think having this immersive music element in the productions that we do, the whole production can benefit from it, certainly, because like, as I told you, the venues, they have the systems, they can make use of the space. So you should do it. And when it's done by the composer already, it has the most value in it because it's already in the story kind of thing and not some effect that I'm adding. But then in a lot of VR productions, I find myself using stereo for the music element, or like a headlocked binaural, just a binaural mix that you cannot move your head inside of it, just to not distract too much, because it's not adding to the quality of the application. And so it depends. I think the answer is it depends.
Binaural is something that I find very fascinating. And every time you watch my podcast, you hear me say that because I'm so fascinated by it.
Okay.
The first time I heard binaural, you take off the headphones and you're a little bit surprised that you're not in the space that you were in with the production. That's one of the more fascinating technologies that I see for the future. What are some of the technologies that have only arrived over the last 10 or 5 years that you're now using? And maybe what are some future technologies that you're looking forward to?
Okay. So certainly formats like Dolby Atmos and MPEG-H, they are bringing like object-based audio to the mainstream. Could definitely say.
Explain what that is for those who are not familiar.
Object-based? Okay. So for me, it's so natural that it's hard to explain even, because I'm always thinking and working on objects, and I think everyone actually does that in a DAW. If you have a track, you have an object. So, and if you position that in your stereo space, you could also talk about doing object-based audio. But then the difference is that when you play it out later, the print master that you deliver, it carries kind of, if you think back to that stereo production, it would carry the stems and even multi-tracks in it with the panning information. So going to spatial audio and bigger systems, we are disconnecting the production side where I am placing objects, audio objects, like panning them, from the reproduction side, where I'm using a rendering system that takes that information, like every audio stream plus metadata information, where is the object in that very moment. And then it's trying its best to use the speakers it has in its system. It just knows where the speakers are and reproduce what that sound field is supposed to be. And that is different to channel-based, because in channel-based, we would play out a rendered sound for each speaker. So when we have stereo, we do that. We have a stereo bus, and this is just one stereo file we are delivering. And when we do 5.1 surround, we do the same. We deliver for each speaker in that system. And then we can add height to it, and we even have like 5.14. We have 4 layers in the height. And we actually can do the same with channel-based there. But the object-based is really just the way we deliver the production.
So where a channel base, you're delivering one file for a mono, and it's an audio file, or 2 files for stereo, and they're both audio files.
Exactly.
Or, right,
or
7.1.4,
exactly,
and it's 12 audio files.
Yes.
That will be played through those speaker channels.
Right.
In object-based mixing, you're actually delivering an end reproduction file that includes the airplane audio file and then data about where it is in this 3-dimensional space.
Exactly. Yeah. So
That's amazing.
you can have you can have it rendered at the end in 5.1 on a 5.1 system, but it might still be 64 channels of audio with all the objects that you just mentioned, the airplane flying and all that, and this position. Then it gets rendered for this speaker system in particular. But the good thing and cool thing about that is you don't have to decide during production where it's going to be played back. And I think that's the new innovative thing about object-based audio, that you're really disconnecting these two things, which brings a lot of freedom if you think about it. Because if you basically could just deliver one mix carrying all those objects, and then one day there's a device that only has like one speaker, my kitchen radio, for example, and it knows how to deal with that one speaker in the best possible way. So it creates the best possible mix of all those objects that are coming in, trying to make it sound good. Same with stereo system, it could do that. So it's kind of taking this, what mastering engineers would usually do with a stereo mix. And I mean, we are definitely not at a point where this technology can replace the mastering engineer. It's gonna sound 1,000 times better with a proper stereo mastering. But you get so much more flexibility in the format that I think it has a quite big future. So that's one of the inventions, let's say, of the last years. And I think what object-based also enables us and will enable us in the future is, right now we have to, I have to move back. So we have to think about degrees of freedom, which means like, how can I move inside an audio mix? Let's say when we think about spatial audio, we have the room. The question is now, how can I, as a listener, move inside it? It's pretty easy if you have the speaker set up in the room and you can move inside the room just freely. Then obviously we say we have 6 degrees of freedom. We can walk in 3 directions, like, up and down, left, right, front, rear. And we can also rotate our head, which is another 3 degrees of freedom for rotation. And right now, when we bring that to translate it to binaural rendering, most of the time we would have only the 3 degrees of freedom. So in an ambisonics format, we could possibly like rotate our head. By the way, in binaural, you're such a fan of it, but if you have a binaural mix that you deliver, it's already just a stereo file and you cannot do the rotation inside. But with formats like ambisonics, you could do that. So ambisonics being one of the formats that have been developed for many years, but it's also something that became more and more popular and actually had its first application, I would say, like a mainstream application with the advent of the 360 videos on YouTube. But then also with object-based mixes, you are even more free because you can virtually also place the listener inside that room because you have all the metadata information still in audio. So the renderer could possibly like move you inside that space, which is, for example, what also happens in game engines and games. So we are doing that already since many years, but now it's bringing it all together and putting it to the next level. And these renderers become more extensive when it comes to having binaural 3D audio rendering. You get a much better realistic rendering than you would have 10, 15 years ago in a game engine.
Is the main difference going from 10, 15 years ago, we had stereo rendering, to now binaural rendering? The main difference is the HRTF? Or is there something else that I'm missing?
There is... Yeah, I mean, all types. Yeah, I think it's true. It's just, it's in the end, it's the HRTF that is being added. Because all the time of arrival differences and level differences is what was being used in stereo already. Now we're adding these HRTF to make it sound like it's 3D and really coming from that position. Yeah. So in the rendering process, this is what actually happens.
Cool. So yeah, the time of arrival, the level differences between each ears, that's a part of stereo that we've been using for a long time.
Right.
And now we're getting into this HRTF, head-related transfer function, where we're taking into account the acoustical characteristics of our outer ears and our skull, and that's making it even more immersive. Of course, there is one limitation that everyone has differently shaped ears and differently shaped skulls, but even solutions are being made for those as well.
Yeah. I think there has also been recent research that's saying that possibly like the individual HRTF is maybe not the most important thing to have, because you can train your brain to having a new set of HRTFs, and your brain gets used to that, and then you start, hearing better with that. But I'm not so much in that research, so maybe it has already, something new of results there.
So the main limitation right now would be that, yes, you can put on headphones or have an immersive audio system and control a character on a screen with a joystick, and that position of your character determines what you're hearing. So if there's a car crash to the right and an alarm starts going off, and you turn your character to the right, well, that now gets panned center right ahead of you.
Yes.
The next step might be, can we play with those first 3 degrees of movement with the joystick, but then control the other 3 degrees of rotation of our head with our head? Can we track the person's head so that if your character is looking straight and then you, the player, look over to the right, your soundscape changes?
Yeah, you need that head tracking for everything where you're rendering in binaural. So I think, yes, this is something, it was focused on the screen that you had in front of you back then, and now you could actually focus it on your point of view. And so this is very important for virtual reality, because there you can actually change your viewing angle and see like differently, whilst before you would change your viewing angle only on the screen in front of you. So the panning would also move with that, and it would know the position due to your mouse movements or your keyboard movements. But now it's becoming more realistic and natural, because you are taking on the VR classes, and then your head rotation defines like what you are seeing. And that is something we need to take into account when we do the binaural rendering. Yes. But I think technology-wise, when it comes to binaural rendering, it could have been the same. Let's say if you have a 2D screen in front of you, you could take that information and the angle that you're looking at and just do the binaural rendering based on that. So it could have been done before. Maybe it was done before even. I'm not familiar with games that had binaural. But I think what I wanted to say is, what's the new thing with object-based audio in terms of becoming a mainstream, and not maybe only for games, is that it opens up these new possibilities also for other applications. So you could think about kind of sound installation that you can walk through, and the listener is being tracked and gets his individual binaural mix on the headphones due to his location in the room and in his viewing angle, something like that. I mean, I couldn't name like the proper application yet, but that's the beauty of it, because it's kind of, we are in the field of experimentation at the moment, and phase. And we possibly will see new ideas and things popping up, and it's very, very interesting field.
The most advanced I've actually heard is just, my AirPods with Apple Spatial Audio. Turn my head to the right, turn my head to the left. The audio seems to come from the same place. What's the most advanced version of this technology that exists today that you've experienced?
Well, this would only be the Apple system. There's 3 degrees of freedom, so the rotation only. You cannot move and translate in the room. So obviously with VR technology, you have these tracking systems built into the VR classes. So it does that by default. So you can have the position. And when we work in a VR experience, then usually it would have already that translation of where is the user in the scene, and then also the rotation where the viewing angle. So with the head tracking we get that, and then we add these both things and then render the audio depending on where the user is and where he's looking at. So I think that's kind of already the standard when it comes to virtual reality.
Wow.
And going beyond that, I would have to think.
That's
honestly.
incredible. I haven't tried any of these virtual reality formats. I would love to
You
if
should
you have
definitely do it.
something
Maybe we have
around.
some time later on. I can
Yeah.
show you.
But that's incredible. I thought we were still on our way to what if we could do head tracking effectively, but it sounds like we're already there.
Definitely. I mean, it's being used all the time. It's natural also in a way.
And it's really cool because getting back to the object-based mixing, instead of having the burden of panning things to different speakers in a fixed speaker system, you just get to design a 3D space and deliver that.
Exactly.
And then
that's what we do. Yeah. We design that space. We deliver whatever the system needs, and then it makes the best out of it. And it has a beauty to it. It has its challenges, obviously. But yeah, I really love that approach. And this is the way my brain started working very naturally, because I do think spatial audio also comes from a very natural way of hearing. I mean, you certainly have heard of the cocktail party effect. You know the cocktail party effect, right?
Go ahead and explain it just for those who don't.
So when you are in a party situation and there's so many people talking and there's music playing in the background, or very loud actually, and then it becomes really hard to understand people. But if you are talking to one person in front of you and you see and you focus, your brain can filter out astonishingly well all that noise and just listen and understand. And this is only possible due to the spatial cues that your brain gets from your ears. And so this doesn't work properly anymore if you only have one ear, for example. And that's why I think spatial audio also really helps to get back to that natural way of hearing, and it also enables you. And I think that's why we have more space available, because you can focus more easily on certain things in the spatial audio mix. But I also think it's more relaxing for the brain in a way. So I tend to lean back when I hear to immersive mix, and my brain feels a lot calmer than when I listen to a stressed out and squeezed out stereo mix where I might still be able to hear everything and focus on it some way, but it's just so much more relaxed when it's spatial. And I think that's a very important, interesting fact about spatial audio.
It's incredible how much, for lack of a better word, computational power our minds have to do that. When you think about it, all we're really giving our brain is two audio files or two audio waveforms. And in your right ear, that's one waveform that's extremely complex. It's made up of all the environmental sounds, all of the information coming from the person you're talking to, the music playing at that cocktail party. And your brain is able to pick out of that just one element. The same thing goes for maybe if you are just listening to a stereo music mix, especially if you're a mixing engineer and you've been doing this and practicing, you can listen in and hear the trumpets. You can listen in and hear the violins and the cellos separately. Giving your brain a experience that allows it to do that, what it does best, it only seems natural. And that is what's possible with the newest developments in immersive.
I just think it's a natural progression of it. Makes sense.
I want to ask on behalf of the person who's made it this far in the episode and is interested in this and maybe is just becoming aware that this is an opportunity in the audio field. What are some software that they can download and start messing with right now and experimenting? And what would you recommend that someone who aspires to maybe work in immersive audio in the future do today?
Okay. So I think two options I can give. If you are interested into VR linear 360-degree video production, then I can recommend downloading Reaper because it's just like not free, but you can kind of sort of use it for free for a while at least.
And even a perpetual license is very affordable.
Yeah, it's very affordable
compared to other DAWs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and also it can host VST plugins. And there's a nice set from my university called IEM. And they have a plugin suite that is available for free. And that can use, that does the ambisonics encoding, but also decoding. So if you want to get into how ambisonics works and want to try it out and want to see how this, head rotation kind of thing works, this is a good starting point. You can get a cheap head tracker and it reads OSC messages, this plugin suite, so you can have head rotation inside of it. So you can get into that field. If you're more interested into game audio and interactive design, I would recommend downloading Unity and just getting used of, open up a test scene, just getting used of placing audio objects in this XYZ space that you have available, and then possibly adding a binaural renderer. As a plugin, they come for free. Oculus renderer is being delivered by standard if you open a VR project or create a VR project. So you can have binaural rendering, all of it in there. You can even add ambisonics sounds and mixes. So you can combine those two worlds. And off you go. You can create ambisonics atmospheres that are like rather the atmospheric sounds that are far away, like the thunderstorm that is coming up right
Windows
now.
Windows open. Yeah, we're not adding this in post. This is the true atmosphere.
This is true atmosphere, right? So plus you can have all these object-based things like single elements that are maybe like a visual object that you can even, touch and throw around in space. And if you start playing with these two elements, you already get a kind of feel what spatial audio can do. Or if you want to go like more of the, let's say, mainstream version of spatial audio, immersive mixing, and more sort of in the film realm kind of things, I would really recommend to start with a mixing system like Dolby Atmos, because it's just more accessible than the more individual tools. And you might not need it for your speaker setup at home. So if you are lucky enough to have enough speakers, maybe get a bunch of them, like really could be cheap speakers also. Or just use binaural rendering of the renderer to get a preview on headphones. Then you can use any of the DAWs that are available with built-in Dolby Atmos. I think up to today, I could name, there's Logic, first and foremost. There's Pro Tools that has it built in, and Nuendo. Those are, I think, the three main ones where you can just out of the box start mixing and have your binaural rendering in place. So when you use Logic and Apple AirPods, for example, I think you can even use the head tracking of the AirPods for monitoring in binaural. It wasn't possible a couple of months ago, but I've heard it's possible now, so I haven't tried it. Just maybe check it out if it's possible. And then that might be a really cool start, because I think, honestly, adding head tracking in a binaural mix is very crucial to add on to the 3D audio experience. You need that movement to feel it.
It's amazing what tools are available, and I'll leave links to all of those in the description below this video. You can get started today. That's what's crazy. Even if you don't have an amazing speaker setup like you have here in your studio, if you have a pair of regular headphones and you download Reaper and some of the tools that you just discussed, you can get started working on what is a frontier in audio. So thank you so much to you, Daniel, and thank you to Anna for welcoming me in here and telling me about all this really cutting edge stuff. I appreciate it. I'm fascinated by it, and I really respect the work you do.
Thank you, and thanks for coming by. Have a good trip back to the US.